All right, so this is respecting player fantasies and dating sims, and if you saw a game attached to this title, no you didn't. All right, let's get started. Who the hell am I? My name's Betty. I'm an Aquarius, I'm single, and I'm always picking the wrong romance choice in a BioWare game. I need to speak my truth. Varric is hot, and I should be able to kiss him. We got a good crowd here today. So I've worked on quite a few projects. I got my start at Ubisoft, where I worked on Assassin's Creed Odyssey and Assassin's Creed Valhalla. I've also worked in the indie space. I was a writer on Hardspace Shipbreaker. I've been a teacher for Pixels Montreal, which is a program that teaches people to write narratives for games. It gets their portfolios up. It's a great networking exercise. It's a really great program. I also contributed to the UBC game writing program online. And then I worked on a game called Lovelink, which you may recognize, but no, you don't. And currently, I'm at a studio called Survios, which is located in Los Angeles and makes very cool VR games. Check it out. All right, let's get to the talk, why you're all here. So the purpose of this talk is, one, determine your audience early and respect that audience. You can't change audiences halfway through the game unless your game really resonated with somebody who wasn't supposed to. I call this the My Little Pony syndrome. Next is identifying the player fantasy in your characters, and then how to course correct for a live audience. For the sake of this talk, we're going to be talking about a live audience game. And then finally, how to be creative within the genre of this game, because sometimes it feels like everything's been done, and the thing that you want to do really badly has already been done, so what's the point anyway? But stay tuned. All right, so we got a little content warning for this one. We've got some minor male nudity, some butts and abs, as well as discussion of sex and sexuality. So if you don't like that, I'll give you a moment to leave. But I assume that you're all here because you like that. So here's our hypothetical game. All art by me. There's over 16 endings, you guys. This is hypothetical lover. So we've determined our game. Next, we've got to determine who the audience for this game is going to be. So I've decided to pick heterosexual women, well, predominantly heterosexual women aged 18 to 32, with bisexual women and gay men as our secondary audiences. So we're going to aim to hit this lovely demographic right here. So we have to research. You know, we've picked a demographic, we have to research what is that demographic into. So I used Google, and I found out this is what they're into. I don't know who this guy is. The internet calls him Daddy. Please don't tell me his name. So, you know, there is a level of expectation of a certain type of physical attractiveness within the overall consumers of this game type in this particular demographic. So that's my long way of saying abs, some butts, maybe a little bit of bulge, if you're feeling saucy. So we've got our game, we've got our archetype, we have the audience expectation, so let's get moving on to coming up with a character. So this is a heavy hitter. He's very popular. This is Randy. So we're going to take a moment to really think about what the player fantasy is in here. What do heterosexual women, bisexual women, gay men, ages 18 to 32, find appealing about the cowboy fantasy. So how do we find that out? We got to research. Research. These are all real book titles. This is what I found when I Googled it. I'm a big fan of Branding the Virgin. So based on the cowboy archetype, we're going to have certain expectations of being more of an outdoorsy person, rope play, loving horses. It's a big among horse girls, I'm not going to lie. As well as people who like a stoic man who works with his hands and likes to take his shirt off. You know, a real Matthew McConaughey, pre-True Detective type. And, you know, you can do your research however you want. You can post a thread on Twitter. I use Google. What do women like? What do cowboys do? It hasn't set me wrong so far. You know, this isn't high school. You can use Wikipedia. And so once you've gotten kind of a general idea from reading through Grumpy Cowboy and Branding the Virgin and seeing kind of what the set pieces are, what the general narrative beats are, what your players are going to expect from this character if they pick Randy. Then you get to work on Randy and what his story is going to be. So based on all of this, Randy's kind to animals. He works with his hands. He's a bit of a service top. He likes some role play, some rope play rather. Though I think he might be into role play as well, but it's very standard stuff, like sexy nurse. He doesn't know Dungeons and Dragons very well. So now that we've identified all of these tropes about cowboy characters, we need to figure out, what he's like to talk to, because, yeah, someone can be into rope play and animals, but, do they text a lot? Do they get along with their parents? These are important things that you need to think about when you're coming up with a character for anything, let alone a character for a romance. And once we kind of find what really fascinates us narratively about this character, that's what I like to call the narrative seed. And I've made a cool little diagram about this. So the narrative seed it has two very important things, which is what excites the writer and what the writer wants to excite the player with. So while we start out with a basic idea, a basic design of the character, we need to move forward with what the narrative is going to be and what the narrative is going to be about. In the case of Randy, there are several directions that you could go. You could say that he lives on a ranch, but the ranch is in financial trouble. The bank's trying to take the ranch away. And now all of this romance that you have is fraught, and it's involved with, we got those money problems. We got to rustle up some money. Sometimes it might be about animals, He runs a horse rescue, and there's this one horse that's just, it's the most strong, intense horse he's ever met. It's just been impossible to get its trust. But you, player, you have a magic touch with this horse. I call this the horse girl narrative. You can come up with a number of things. Randy is a staunch environmentalist because he loves the land so much and he hates oil so much. And there's a big oil field that's being built right next to his ranch that's going to ruin the lives of him and his chickens and all of that. And then the story becomes about that. So that's your narrative seed and the way that it grows into a beautiful narrative, a beautiful story. So from there, once we figured out what our story is going to be, once we figured out our archetypes for Randy, we can come up with a bit more of a love profile for Randy. So we figure out what his love language is. He's a quality time and acts of service guy. He likes to spend time looking at the sunset with you. He's a real fan of sourdough starters, so he likes to bring you bread. That's his act of service. He doesn't really, he doesn't like to text. He's not a phone guy. It can be really infuriating because you'll be like, Randy, where are we meeting for dinner? And he replies in 10 hours, right before you're supposed to be there. Randy, be more considerate, please. He's shy around people, but he's, a lot more active around animals. He's a lot more talkative. He talks to his pigs, his cows, his chickens. And as I said, he loves baked goods. He's a big fan of musicals, as you saw. He loves Oklahoma. And he lost his parents at a young age, perhaps to an oil baron. You know, it's our collaborative story. We'll find out. Maybe they were killed by vampires. I'm not sure. So we release Randy's series as a set of episodes. We're going to call them episodes for this. We're going to say that it's a season because this is a live service game. And so Randy's performing really well on the first few episodes, but there seems to be an extreme drop-off around episode 3, episode 4. And there's that's a flop, that's a problem, because this is a very well-performing character. He's one of our all-stars. People love Randy, but they don't love this episode of Randy, and we need to find out what the problem is there. So this is the real bread and butter here, folks. This is tried and true, tested information. So if you're going to take notes of one slide, this is the one. So what players do not want, and you got to think about yourself as players too, and even just as consumers of media, what stuff really drives you nuts. And you'll find it there. So a character who needs the player to solve all their problems. Players are playing this for their own escape. They're not playing this to feel like they're the therapist to Randy. You know, they want a man who can take care of himself, a person who can take care of themselves, a person who's looking after their needs, because as the player, this is their vacation from their lives. And whatever their life is, if it's messy, stressful, whatever, we've all got stuff going on, and we all play video games to make that a little bit easier. The second thing is very similar to the first thing, but a character who doesn't pay enough attention to the player. Like, if you feel like you have to chase around a fictional man, the third one, this one's a bit heavier, which is a sexual encounter without player consent. And this is something that used to be a bit more of a problem with older games. People are getting more aware of this, but basically gating any sexual encounter with, hey, there are butts in this, warning, if your parents are in the room, they'll probably walk in just the moment that there's a bare ass on your screen. Because people might even be down to, like, having a sexual fun time with Randy, but they might also be on the bus sitting next to a child. So having the option to say, thanks, but maybe later, very important. Disregard for established canon, you know, if you want to get Reddit really mad. If you want to get any fan really mad, you know, if, for example, with Randy, we established that his favorite musical is Oklahoma in episode 1. What if in episode 5, or our problem episode, episode 3, he says that Chicago's his favorite? Randy, what is the truth? Love triangles are an iffy one. Some people love them, some people not a huge fan. A lot of us who grew up in a certain time period are tired of having them shoved down our throats. And so in the case of love triangles, you really gotta telegraph that early, because if season 2 begins and it's like, hello, my name is Paolo, and I am your other amour. And you're like, man, I'm just trying to hang out with Randy. Can you go away? No, I am here for the whole season. Whereas people who know, you know, they see the book cover with both Randy and Paolo holding on to the player. It's like, okay, so there's going to be a love interest up in this. Let me get ready. And then the last one is subverted expectations, which is why I joked about vampires, but we'll be bringing it up. So a vampire storyline in a cowboy romance. You also gotta telegraph this. If your cowboy character is suddenly gonna have to deal with vampires, you know, people who are setting themselves up for a nice romantic walk with Matthew McConaughey are not expecting to turn around a corner and find Buffy and Spike standing there. It's not the kind of crossover that people are looking for in this genre, unless, you know, you're making Ultimate Showdown of Ultimate Destiny the dating game. Yeah, so now that we've looked at all of this, I'm going to give us a little bit of a pop quiz with this next slide. So here's the scene. What do you guys think is the cause of the player friction in this sequence? This person in the front here wearing the Wolverine shirt. I think it says Wolverine. I'm so sorry if it doesn't. Oh, UC Irvine. I can read.
It doesn't feel like something the actual person would say, or like how people act in real life. It feels like,
Okay, Randy's feeling a little out of character.
yeah, it feels like the writer's trying to be considerate, but the way they're going about it is actively harming the enjoyment of the character.
I like that answer, but I'm looking for a very specific one. I'm going to ask this person in the, sorry? The answer that this fellow has given us is that they feel that Randy is being represented in an out-of-character way, and that's how Randy wouldn't approach a sensual scene. This person here in the plaid shirt. That's correct. This is an ungated sexual encounter. So I'm got a little switchy here. There's going to be so many Barbie dolls smacking against each other. So players didn't, following up on this answer, Randy, as we said, is someone who's a little bit shy. So giving him a sex scene this early on in the season might feel a little out of character for players who are looking for a slow burn Texas man romance. Whereas it's also just like, somebody's on the bus and then 2D butt all over their screen while they're sitting next to, I don't know, a pastor, and it's very alienating. So now we're in fix-it mode. How do we fix it, and do we fix it? Because these two things are connected. Sometimes, if it's just a little bit of blip, you just leave it. But we gotta consider how popular is this character with the fan base. In the case of Randy, he's one of our top performers. He's top 3, let's say. And keeping his fan base, happy and continuing is part of what keeps the game going. So we pay more attention to Randy than we would, say, somebody who's less popular. And how do we find out how the fan base is reacting to this? Well, there's lots of ways to get that feedback. You can check message boards, user metrics, feedback, communities, all of that sort of thing. And then the next thing you have to think about is how easy is the fix. So if it's, in this case, just one scene of one episode where we put a sensuality gate, that's an easy fix. That's something that we can get patched in a day, maybe 2. If, as I joked earlier, with Paolo being there for the entire season, that's not something you can patch. That's just something fans are going to have to live with. And then, the last thing is, are the fans being reasonable? Because players are very passionate, and we appreciate their passion. But sometimes, they might get a little bit irritated because a character's wearing the wrong colored boxers. And it's like, okay, guys, we love you. We respect you. Enough. So with that in mind, how do we stay creative? We're going to pivot to Dino. He's not a top earner. But he's unique, and we love him. Dino has a small, very passionate fan base, and a writer who is very passionate about Dino's storyline and who Dino is as a person. Because, yeah, he is a dino furry, but he also has a literature degree. And this is a case where we need to, again, look back to who our main audience for this game is. And so in the case of Dino, he's in the game. Hypothetical lover is kind of, it's for the Facebook crowd, it's for people who aren't your average internet-savvy meme queens. So that's why Dino isn't doing so popular. I feel like Dino would be pulling more numbers if he was in one of these games. And, this is a perfectly great way to make a dating sim. Don't get me wrong, but there is, you're giving people what they want on the cover, so they know what to expect. This is still following all of the lessons that we've learned before, which is that if they buy a game with a bunch of birds on it, And that means they're cool with kissing birds, or at the very least intrigued. Whereas if they buy the game that I've created, Hypothetical Boyfriend, and there's a bird kissing scene, they're like, I was promised hot boys, actually. I'm not sure where this bird thing came in. And you know, these are all incredibly great, valid ways of making a dating sim. These are just all things you have to think about when you're making one. But once you've gained your player's attention, the best way to keep it is by being genuine and heartfelt. So from silly game to more basic game, regardless, the players are going to love it if you put your effort and your heart into it. And that's where we get to the hard truths and the heart truths, which is knowing what your audience wants and catering to it is success, but offering them something new may open up new interests. So people who previously would have written Dino off have had the game Hypothetical Boyfriend for about 3 months now, and they're waiting for the new update of Randy and Joseph and Adam, but you know, they've never played Dino before. And well, he is into Proust. And then suddenly you got a hardcore Dino fan in the making. So basic designs and archetypes will always be the most popular, which is to say, unfortunately, white blonde hunks do the highest numbers. I wish that it was different. But fun writing can bring in wary players. So like, you know, you'll get the most swipes, the most engagement with the characters that fit into the archetypes that are the most sexualized, the most kinkified, if you will. But if people are playing it and they're engaging in the community and they hear about this new character who really isn't their type but is super fun, got a really interesting story, really fun story, they might begin engaging with that as well. It's not something that they would be typically into, but fun writing does a lot. And then the final point is basic character archetypes can include genre-bending twists, but you need to foreshadow it in the promotional material. This is the vampire storyline and the Randy storyline. So if you're gonna have vampires and cowboys, I love it, we love it, it's a great idea, you gotta include it on the cover. Or at the very least have Randy be like, oh man, I've been stocking up on garlic and silver, something fierce. Someone keeps biting my cows, and I don't think it's El Chupacabra. So as we're getting to the end here, to recap, 1, you gotta find your audience. 2, you gotta find your fantasy. 3, you gotta know how to fix that fantasy if it's not hitting the right marks. And lastly, have fun and write the romance that only you can share, because everybody's got a love story in their heart somewhere, and everybody should share it. Thank you. I think we're pretty close to time. I think we've got about 5 minutes, if I'm checking in. So I have time for a little bit of answering questions, but after that, I'll be in the area if you have additional that you want to ask me. I think I'm seeing a person over here with a green jacket that they keep raising their hand.
Oh, wait, do we not use
Oh, no, they're sewing. I'm so sorry.
Do we not use this thing?
Yes.
Does this thing work? Hello, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, so I was really curious about the subverting expectations and not hiding it on the cover. So I think there was a couple of years ago, there's a game that came out called Doki Doki Literature Club, and that whole game, like, it hides what it is in like the first 15 minutes, and then, but everyone loves it because like it's, you know, not spoilers, but like it does other stuff after that.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Did you buy that game because you heard other people talking about the writing?
Yeah?
There we go.
Oh.
People wouldn't have bought it if they hadn't heard the word of mouth. The expectation subversion is great. It's a great game. I've played it. But that's a game that relies heavily on word of mouth and a lot of the topics that we touched on today. So that's a great example. Thank you very much. Over here.
Hey, which one? I can switch.
Whichever one of you, rock, paper, scissors on the microphone.
All right, ready?
Yeah.
1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3.
Go for it.
So I was curious in how you incorporate player choice in the narrative, because it seems like you are mostly talking about like a mostly linear narrative with not a lot of branching paths. Like, do you have anything, like, how would you approach, like, what kind of choices would you give the player if you were doing a branching narrative game?
This is a great question, and my experience in this type of game does involve branching narrative. I just didn't cover it much today because I was focusing more on player fantasy. So stuff that I would, conversations are a great place to include branching. What do you want to ask Randy about his cows, his chickens, his horses? How do you want to respond to Randy's great questions and thoughts about life in the universe? We really want the player to feel like this is a mutual relationship of getting to know each other. Another great place to include player choice is avatar customization, because everybody wants to be a cute little doll hanging out with these hot boys. I'm going to move on to this question because I'm trying to keep my answers short. Thank you, though.
I was wondering if you had anything to say on like how dating sim elements have been incorporated into different genres, because it seems like it's harder to sell what the fantasy is on the cover if it's just one element of like a broader game.
It can be very difficult because dating sims can be such complex games themselves that trying to incorporate them as a mini game is a great place to have scope bloat followed by scope cutting. And that's why in a lot of games that include romance elements that you really want to have a fully realized romantic relationship with a character, but you're limited to 3 dates and a sex scene because that's just what's within the scope. And so that's something that you need to think about really early on, and try not to blue sky, try to red sky that early on and be like, okay, what's the least thing that we can ship, and are we happy with that? Because if we're not, let's not include it. Yes, Kirby Hat.
Hello, yes. My question was, outside of writing, how do you still enhance archetypes that are similar to players but still have your own unique spin on it so you're true to your own fantasy?
For me, it's always about real people. And that sounds oversimple, but like, everyone can have an idea of what a cowboy is, but part of the research too is like finding out that like Randy really hates mornings because, it reminds him of his parents' death, or he just likes to sleep in. But that too, one of those two things. But because he works on a farm, he has to. And then that just creates a better place for human connection because, haha, I do that. Thank you very much. I think that's the last of our questions, and that's great because we're at time. So thanks so much for coming out today, everybody.